Before the arrival of Prophet Muhammad, the Arabs believed in a wide range of religious and spiritual systems. The Arabian Peninsula was home to various tribes, each with its own set of beliefs and practices. In the pre-Islamic period, often referred to as the Age of Jahiliyyah, the Age of Ignorance, the Arabs were polytheistic, worshipping numerous deities and idols, many of which were associated with natural elements such as the sun, moon, and stars. The most important of these deities were believed to inhabit sacred sites, like the Kaaba in Mecca, where pilgrims would gather to offer sacrifices and perform rituals. The Kaaba itself was a center of worship, housing over 360 idols representing different gods and goddesses. The most famous of these idols was Hubal, considered the chief god by the Quraysh tribe in Mecca. Alongside Hubal, there were many other gods, each attributed to various aspects of life, such as Al-Lat, Al-Uzza, and Manat, who were thought to govern fate, fortune, and fertility. People would seek the intercession of these deities through prayers and offerings, hoping for protection, guidance, or prosperity. In addition to polytheism, the Arabian tribes also practiced animism, believing in spirits inhabiting natural objects like trees, rocks, and certain animals. These spirits were often thought to hold power over various elements of life, and rituals were performed to appease them or to ask for favors. Some tribes also had sacred trees or wells where they would pray and perform ceremonies. Alongside these polytheistic practices, there was also a presence of Judaism and Christianity in the Arabian Peninsula. Jewish communities lived in regions like Yathrib, later known as Medina, and there were Christian tribes, particularly in the northern parts of Arabia, influenced by the Byzantine Empire. However, these monotheistic religions were often seen as separate from the prevailing polytheistic beliefs and were not widespread in the majority of the population. Tribal traditions played a central role in the social and religious life of pre-Islamic Arabs. Loyalty to one's tribe was paramount, and many of the religious practices were closely tied to tribal identity. The Arabs believed in fate and the concept of qadar, divine decree, which was thought to be determined by the gods. There was a strong sense of honor and pride, with tribal feuds, blood vengeance, and codes of hospitality being deeply ingrained in society. The Arabs also had a concept of a higher power, known as Allah, but this was often understood in a vague, abstract manner. They acknowledged Allah as the supreme God, but his role was seen more as a distant creator, and worship was primarily directed towards the idols and deities they believed had a more direct influence on daily life. Some tribes did not fully reject the notion of monotheism and saw Allah as a creator god, but they still relied on intermediary gods for practical matters. There were also various forms of divination and superstitions among the Arabs. Soothsayers, or kahin, were believed to possess special powers to predict the future and offer advice based on omens, dreams, and signs from nature. These practices were widely followed, and many people sought guidance from these figures to make important decisions, such as during times of war or personal crises. The moral and social fabric of pre-Islamic Arabian society was marked by certain virtues, such as bravery, generosity, and hospitality. However, it was also characterized by practices that Islam would later condemn, such as infanticide, especially of female children, blood feuds, and exploitation of the poor. The social structure was often hierarchical, with a strong emphasis on lineage and ancestry, and the position of women in society was generally one of subordination. This was the religious and cultural environment into which Prophet Muhammad was born. The beliefs and practices of the pre-Islamic Arabs were diverse and complex, blending elements of polytheism, animism, and monotheistic influences from neighboring civilizations. The revelation of Islam brought a profound shift in these beliefs, advocating for the worship of one God, Allah, and calling for moral and social reforms. The arrival of Prophet Muhammad marked a pivotal moment in the history of the Arabian Peninsula. Muhammad's message was clear. There is only one God, Allah, and all the various idols and deities worshipped by the Arabs were false. His message challenged the polytheistic beliefs that had been deeply embedded in Arabian society for centuries, disrupting the religious order that had been based on idol worship, tribal loyalties, and social practices that contradicted the concept of a just, monotheistic God. The central tenet of Muhammad's teachings was the rejection of idol worship and the belief in the oneness of Allah, a concept that would later become known as Tawhid in Islamic theology. The Prophet Muhammad's message was not merely theological, but also called for social justice, the protection of the weak, the abolition of practices such as infanticide, particularly the killing of female infants, a widespread practice in pre-Islamic Arabia, and a call for a moral transformation of society that would eliminate tribal feuds and blood vengeance. Muhammad emphasized the importance of compassion, charity, and justice, urging the rich to care for the poor and the oppressed. Islam's impact was also revolutionary in its treatment of women. In the pre-Islamic period, women were often treated as property, and their rights were severely limited. The Quran, revealed to Muhammad, granted women rights that were unprecedented in the context of 7th century Arabia. Women were given the right to inherit, own property, and choose their spouses, and the practice of female infanticide was expressly forbidden. Although the societal norms regarding gender roles continued to evolve over time, Islam laid the foundation for the improved treatment of women in many aspects of life. The message of Islam also introduced a sense of universal brotherhood that transcended tribal divisions. Muhammad's teachings rejected the notion that one's identity and status should be determined solely by tribal lineage or ancestry. Instead, in the eyes of Allah, all people were equal, with the only distinction being based on piety and good deeds. This idea of egalitarianism challenged the deeply entrenched social hierarchies and led to a redefinition of what it meant to belong to a community. The theological revolution brought by Islam was accompanied by significant social, cultural, and political changes. Initially, Muhammad's message was met with resistance from the Quraysh tribe and other powerful groups in Mecca, who saw the Prophet's teachings as a threat to their social and economic power. The Quraysh were the custodians of the Kaaba and had a vested interest in maintaining the status quo, where their religious authority and wealth were derived from the pilgrimage and trade related to the many idols in the Kaaba. As a result, the early Muslims faced severe persecution, with many of them being boycotted, tortured, and forced to flee from Mecca. The migration of Prophet Muhammad and his followers to Medina in 622 CE, known as the Hijra, marked the beginning of a new chapter in the history of Islam. In Medina, Muhammad not only became a spiritual leader, but also a political and military one. His leadership in Medina allowed him to establish a model of governance based on Islamic principles, including justice, consultation, and the welfare of the prophetic message. Islam emerged as a transformative force, challenging the old ways and offering a new vision for society, one rooted in the belief in one God, the importance of justice, and the equality of all people. The legacy of Prophet Muhammad's teachings continues to shape the course of history and remains a living and vibrant force in the world today. As Islam spread beyond the Arabian Peninsula, the transformative impact of Prophet Muhammad's teachings continued to evolve, influencing not only the religious and spiritual lives of Muslims, but also the political, economic, and cultural landscapes of vast regions. The Prophet's message transcended borders and established a unified Muslim identity that stretched from Spain in the west to the Indian subcontinent in the east. Through the centuries, Islamic civilization continued to grow, producing remarkable achievements in science, philosophy, literature, art, and architecture. One key feature of the Islamic world was its diversity. While the core principles of Islam remained consistent, the vast geographical reach of the Muslim world meant that local customs, languages, and cultures were integrated into Islamic practices. This pluralism allowed Islam to be adaptable and inclusive, uniting people from different ethnic backgrounds, such as Arabs, Persians, Turks, Berbers, and South Asians, while still maintaining the foundational unity of faith. In the centuries following Prophet Muhammad's death, the Muslim world experienced periods of unity and division. The caliphates, such as the Umayyads and Abbasids, were pivotal in consolidating the political and religious authority of Islam, but they also faced challenges from rival factions. One of the most significant of these challenges was the division between Sunni and Shia Muslims, which began as a dispute over the rightful successor to the Prophet Muhammad. This schism led to the formation of two major branches of Islam, each with distinct theological views, practices, and leadership structures. Despite this division, both branches continue to share the core beliefs of Islam, including the belief in the oneness of God and the finality of the prophethood of Muhammad. The golden age of Islamic civilization, particularly during the Abbasid Caliphate, was marked by immense intellectual and cultural achievements. Scholars in the Muslim world contributed groundbreaking work in a wide range of fields. The translation movement, which involved translating Greek, Persian, and Indian texts into Arabic, helped preserve ancient knowledge and set the stage for new discoveries. The works of Muslim scholars like Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, Avicenna, Al-Razi, and Ibn Rushd, Averroes, laid the foundation for developments in philosophy, medicine, astronomy, and mathematics that would later influence the European Renaissance. In the realm of science, Muslims made significant advances in fields such as optics, algebra, and chemistry. The invention of the numeral system we use today, known as Arabic numerals, is one of the many contributions of Islamic scholars, along with advancements in astronomy, which included the creation of observatories and more accurate astronomical tables. Physicians in the Islamic world developed sophisticated medical practices, including surgical techniques and the use of pharmaceuticals, many of which laid the foundation for modern medicine. The cultural contributions of the Islamic world during this period were also immense. Architecture flourished with the construction of grand mosques, palaces, and other buildings that blended aesthetic beauty with functional design. The iconic mosques of Córdoba, Baghdad, and Istanbul, along with the Alhambra in Spain, remain testaments to the creativity and sophistication of Islamic architects. The art of calligraphy, particularly in the form of intricate Quranic inscriptions, became a highly revered practice, and Islamic literature produced many masterpieces, including the epic poems of Persian poets like Rumi and the works of famous philosophers such as Al-Ghazali and Ibn Khaldun. Islam also played a role in shaping the political and legal structures of the societies it influenced. Islamic governance was based on principles of justice, equality, and the rule of law, with the Quran and the Hadith serving as the primary sources of Islamic law, or Sharia. Although the interpretation and application of Sharia varied across different regions and periods, it provided a framework for ensuring the fair treatment of individuals and promoting moral and social responsibility. Islamic law emphasized the rights of women, the protection of orphans and the poor, and the importance of honesty and integrity in trade and commerce. The spread of Islam also introduced new concepts of religious tolerance and pluralism, especially in the early centuries. Under Islamic rule, non-Muslim communities, including Christians, Jews, and others, were allowed to practice their faiths with certain protections and privileges. These communities, known as dhimmis, were required to pay a special tax, but were otherwise free to worship and live according to their religious traditions. This policy of religious tolerance facilitated coexistence between diverse religious communities and contributed to the development of rich cultural exchanges between Muslims, Jews, and Christians. However, the history of Islam has not been without its challenges. As the Islamic Empire expanded, it faced internal conflicts, political fragmentation, and external threats. The Crusades, which were launched by European Christians in the 11th and 12th centuries, were a series of military campaigns aimed at reclaiming Jerusalem from Muslim rule. While the Crusades caused significant hardship for both Muslims and Christians, they also led to cultural and intellectual exchanges between the Islamic world and Europe, particularly in the fields of science and philosophy. In more recent history, the decline of the Ottoman Empire, the colonization of Muslim-majority regions by European powers, and the challenges of modernity have all posed significant challenges to the Muslim world. However, the core teachings of Islam, faith in one God, the importance of justice, compassion, and knowledge, continue to inspire and guide millions of people around the globe. The legacy of Prophet Muhammad continues to shape the lives of Muslims and the broader world in profound ways. His teachings on monotheism, social justice, morality, and the importance of knowledge remain as relevant today as they were 1,400 years ago. The influence of Islam, both in terms of its religious message and its cultural contributions, can be seen in every corner of the globe, from the arts to politics, science, and philosophy. Islam is not just a religion, but a way of life that encompasses spirituality, ethics, and a sense of responsibility toward others and the world. It emphasizes the importance of community, family, and justice, encouraging believers to work toward the betterment of society while remaining mindful of their relationship with God. As Muslims continue to reflect on the teachings of Prophet Muhammad and the Quran, they seek to embody the values of compassion, mercy, and humility, striving to build a world that reflects the ideals of peace, equity, and social harmony that Muhammad advocated. Community. The Constitution of Medina, a document drafted by Muhammad, served as a social and political framework that ensured cooperation among the various tribes and communities, including Jews and other non-Muslims, within the city. The spread of Islam was further catalyzed by a series of military confrontations, but also through the peaceful example of Muhammad's character and the appeal of his message. Over time, Islam spread across the Arabian Peninsula and beyond, as it provided a comprehensive and inclusive system of beliefs, practices, and laws that addressed the spiritual, social, and political needs of the people. The impact of Islam was profound not only on the Arabian Peninsula, but on the broader world. It helped to unify the diverse and often fragmented tribes of Arabia, creating a single Muslim community, the Ummah, bound by shared faith and moral values. This unity fostered the development of an Islamic civilization that would go on to make significant contributions to science, medicine, philosophy, literature, and art, particularly during the Golden Age of Islam. In summary, before the Prophet Muhammad's revelation, the Arabs followed a patchwork of beliefs with polytheism, animism, and a vague sense of monotheism coexisting in different regions. Tribal affiliations were central to their identity, and practices that Islam would later challenge, such as idolatry, blood vengeance, and the oppression of women, were prevalent. Prophet Muhammad's message brought a transformative shift in religious, social, and political paradigms, calling for the worship of the one true God, Allah, and advocating for justice, equality, and compassion. The transformation of Arabian society under Islam laid the foundation for a new civilization that would have a far-reaching influence on the world. The transformation brought by Islam under Prophet Muhammad's leadership also laid the groundwork for the intellectual and cultural flourishing that would follow in the centuries to come. In the years following the establishment of the Muslim community in Medina, the rapid expansion of Islam beyond the Arabian Peninsula occurred. This expansion was not just military, but was also driven by the appeal of Islam's message of unity, justice, and spiritual fulfillment. After the death of Prophet Muhammad in 632 CE, the leadership of the Muslim community passed to his close companions, known as the caliphs. The first four caliphs, often referred to as the rightly guided caliphs, Rashidun, played a critical role in consolidating Islamic rule and spreading the teachings of Islam to neighboring regions. They expanded the Muslim empire rapidly, reaching regions such as Persia, Egypt, the Levant, and parts of North Africa. This expansion introduced the Islamic faith and its principles to a diverse range of cultures and peoples. Islam's early conquests brought with them not only military victories, but also the spread of Islamic civilization, culture, and knowledge. One of the key aspects of Islamic governance that helped to preserve social order was the concept of dhimmi, which granted non-Muslims living in Muslim-controlled territories protection and religious freedom, as long as they paid a tax known as the jizya. This tolerance allowed Jewish, Christian, and other religious communities to continue practicing their faiths while being part of the broader Islamic empire. The spread of Islam also helped to foster an intellectual environment where learning and scholarship were highly valued. During the Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates, Islamic scholars made groundbreaking contributions to fields such as mathematics, astronomy, medicine, chemistry, and philosophy. The Islamic Golden Age, roughly spanning from the 8th to the 13th centuries, saw the translation of Greek and Roman philosophical and scientific works into Arabic, preserving much of ancient knowledge. Islamic scholars, such as Avicenna ibn Sina in medicine and Al-Khwarizmi in mathematics, became pioneers whose works would later influence the Renaissance in Europe. In addition to intellectual advancements, Islamic civilization saw cultural and architectural achievements that are still celebrated today. The construction of grand mosques, palaces, and schools became widespread, with the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem and the Alhambra in Spain being iconic examples of Islamic architecture. The intricate designs, calligraphy, and use of geometric patterns in Islamic art reflected a deep spiritual belief that transcended materialism, emphasizing the beauty of the divine and the infinite. In terms of social justice, Islam's teachings continued to reshape the world. The principles of charity, zakat, and the emphasis on helping the poor, orphaned, and disenfranchised were institutionalized into the fabric of society. Throughout Islamic history, charitable foundations known as waqf were established to provide services such as education, healthcare, and financial support to the poor, contributing to the welfare of society as a whole. Islamic legal principles, grounded in the Quran and the Hadith, sayings and actions of the Prophet Muhammad, also provide a comprehensive framework for personal conduct, justice, and governance. These laws, known as Sharia, were designed to ensure that the rights of individuals were protected and that justice was upheld in the community. Islamic teachings, with their emphasis on the equality of all believers before God, also had a profound impact on the development of social and political structures. The idea that all Muslims, regardless of their social status, tribe, or ethnicity, were equal in the eyes of Allah provided a basis for the eventual abolition of systems of caste and class that were prevalent in many parts of the world. This message of universal equality would inspire movements for social reform, including those aimed at abolishing slavery and addressing other forms of exploitation. Despite the early successes and the spread of Islam, the Muslim world was not without its internal challenges. Political disputes, sectarian divisions, and conflicts over leadership led to the formation of different sects within Islam, the most notable being the Sunni and Shia branches. These divisions, while rooted in disagreements over who should succeed Prophet Muhammad as leader, also reflected deeper cultural and theological differences that would shape the future of Islamic civilization. The Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates, despite their successes, eventually gave way to other Islamic dynasties, and over time, different regions of the Muslim world developed distinct cultural and theological traditions. However, the core principles of Islam, the belief in one God, the reverence for Prophet Muhammad as the final messenger, the emphasis on social justice, and the pursuit of knowledge, remain central to the identity of the Muslim community. Today, Islam continues to be a major world religion, with over 1 billion followers worldwide. The teachings of Prophet Muhammad remain a guiding force for Muslims, who look to the Quran, the Hadith, and the example of the Prophet, known as the Sunnah, as the foundation of their faith and practice. The legacy of Muhammad's message, which began in the deserts of Arabia, continues to resonate across the globe, shaping not only the spiritual lives of millions, but also influencing politics, culture, and society in profound ways. In conclusion, before the Prophet Muhammad's time, the Arab world was steeped in polytheism, tribalism, and social inequality. Through his